Hello, hello, everybody. If you are here, please hop in the chat and tell me who you are, where you're tuning in from, and let me think of a fun question. Um, hmm, what's your favorite TV show? Because I need a new TV show, preferably a bingeable TV show, because I don't know, I just stick to the ones that give me comfort, and I've probably watched all of them way too many times. I don't know if there's too many times. I mean, you learn something new each time, but nonetheless, let me know who you are, where you're coming from, and your favorite TV show because I need some inspiration. And while we're hanging out for a few minutes and while everyone's introducing themselves, I will introduce myself so we can get into this conversation and talk about literally whatever you want, whatever questions you have. I am the most open book I know, but for anyone who doesn't know me, hi, my name is Uma. I am first and foremost someone who lives with OCD every single day. I just turned 28 and I've been living with it since I was born. So I've had OCD for 28 years and counting. And I had a very long uh, journey to getting to my treatment and recovery. I suffered and was so debilitated for decades. I was housebound at my worst. We can get into my story more if you want later. But because of the power of evidence based treatment and recovery and the life I get to live now that I truly never imagined was possible. I mean, I turned 28 last week and was just so mind blown at the fact that I'm alive and I'm 28 and I had no idea I'd make it here. Because of being motivated by that, I really feel dedicated to raising awareness for this disorder for the rest of my life and studying it. So I am an advocate with the IOCDF. As a result of recovery and treatment, I went back to school, got my bachelor's, got my master's in neuroscience. I'm now a PhD student in neuroscience studying the neurobiology of OCD, just me search. And I do a bunch of stuff, but really, first and foremost, I'm someone who lives with the disorder every day, having intrusive thoughts right now about the fact that I'm on camera in front of all of you. And I'm just so excited to be here and to just talk about literally anything and be honest and vulnerable and let you know that you're not alone. So I realized I was on the wrong tab. So I thought nobody was commenting and nobody was here. And it was really feeding my thoughts that no one wanted to talk to me. But there's definitely people here. So let me say hello to all of you. Hello, Nathan from Georgia. Spence, Robert. Oh my gosh. Every single time you bring up the bass, we had someone staying over. So my husband moved the bass out there, but it's usually right behind me. I feel like I have to get him to bring it in. I'll text him later. Um, hello, Matt across the pond. Hi, Grace. It's so good to see you. Okay. Oh, hello, Dijin in Puerto Rico. I am so sorry about not having OCD specialists. I know that's a mission of the IOCDF and of every stakeholder really in the community. I'm not sure if NoCD has options for you. I would definitely check them out. But there is also OCD Puerto Rico. That is a affiliate nonprofit, at least working to make things more accessible in Puerto Rico. So I hope you check them out as well. Thank you for the happy belated birthday. Okay. Yes, let me know your favorite TV shows. I need more. I Stranger Things I've seen. I don't know if that's something I could re-binge. I don't know why. It's just so much, but I also watched 20 season show, so what am I talking about? Okay, so while everyone is coming in, leaving your name, where you're from, and your favorite TV show on the chat, let me do some housekeeping and read some announcements. So this live stream is educational and is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please work with your provider or contact a local clinician. You can use the IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/find-help to locate a trained clinician near you. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. If you are in a crisis or if you are ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please call the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. You can also access online at www.988lifeline.org, go to your local emergency room, or call 911. We want to create a safe space and be kind and respectful to everyone. At the end of the day, we're all here to support one another. A note that this is being broadcasted on several social media platforms and is being recorded. All right. Got the fun stuff out of the way. Let me catch up on the chat a little bit. The Resident. Is that a medical show? Because I am very into medical shows. Um, Virginia Supernatural. Oh my gosh, you guys are amazing. Okay. I see a question in the chat not about TV shows. So I will start with that. And in that lets me share more about my background so that you guys can ask me questions if you have questions about it. So Grace asked at 7:05, Uma, will you be presenting neuroscience related research at the in-person conference this summer in Orlando? Yes, Grace, I will be. I am so excited. So in that question tells you that I am a neuroscientist and I am someone who lives with OCD. I love talking about this because not enough of us exist, at least not enough of us who openly disclose it, because there is so much stigma and discrimination against people in academia and in research who talk openly about their lived experience of anything, especially mental illness. And so I really work at the intersection of that. And as someone who is obviously someone in the OCD community with lived experience, I understand that there is such a gap between the world of research. And when I talk about research, I'm talking about biomedical research, neuroscience, psychiatry, psychology, genetics, bioinformatics, everything under the sun that relates to our brains, our bodies, all of that fun stuff. Everyone doing that work doesn't really talk to the people who have lived experience, and lived experience communities often don't talk back. So I am trying to bridge that gap. And so for me, one important part of my work and what I'm really passionate about is understanding basically how OCD works in the brain and developing novel therapeutics. And one avenue of research that's really emerging in our field is psychedelics. And so I have chaired and presented on the panel for this past year at this upcoming Orlando conference, Psychedelics and OCD panel. It is a panel with me and four of my favorite people. You can look them up. They are four of the foremost psychedelic researchers on this planet, psychedelics and OCD researchers. So there is Dr. Carolyn Rodriguez, MD, PhD from Stanford, who runs all of the OCD research at Stanford. She's doing trials with MDMA and ketamine, et cetera. She's a psychiatrist and neuroscientist. There is Dr. Chris Pittenger, who is also an MD, PhD, doing all of that, but at Yale. And then there is Dr. Jamila Hokanson, also at Yale. She's a psychiatrist, and Dr. Terrence Ching, a psychologist at Yale. So we will be doing a panel talking about the updated state of research with psychedelics as related to OCD. That also includes ketamine, even though it's not technically a psychedelic, but in the class of hallucinogens. And it's just really important to have those conversations, not just between researchers, but to the people who are asking all these questions in a way that is evidence-based, that is informed and factually accurate and nuanced, and it's a very complex topic, so we make it accessible. So that's a really long-winded way of saying, yes, I will be presenting this research at the conference during the actual public part of the conference, I guess. And then we also have a research symposium. I don't know how many people know this, but there's always a research symposium on that Thursday of the conference. And it's, for researchers by researchers, and it is open to anybody. The only thing is, because we are talking from a baseline of researchers, oftentimes it's just advised to ask questions if you're asking from the basis of understanding the research, as opposed to what is a gene or what is a cell, because otherwise we'd not be able to communicate anything. And I am still waiting on if my proposal has been accepted or denied to the research symposium. So that's potentially happening, but I'm for sure presenting the psychedelics panel, and I'm really excited. I hope all of you are there to get to see it. Let's see. I can clearly talk about this forever, so I need to cut myself off. Oh my gosh, you guys have so many dairy girls. Is it dairy, like Dairy? Because I love cheese more than anything. I love it more than neuroscience. I love it more than pretty much anything. So that sounds like my show. Ooh, I love that everyone has so many shows. Okay. Matt is asking, Matt asked at 7:09, when will the next season of A Chat with Uma be coming out? Oh my gosh, that means a lot that you're asking that. So I have a podcast called A Chat with Uma, and Matt is one of my favorite people who listens to the show and will definitely be on the show. Surprise, surprise. So I haven't really publicly talked about this only because I've just been in the throes of everything, but I took sort of a break from the show mostly because I had been doing everything by myself and it was getting kind of unsustainable, mostly because I started my PhD last year and there was just so much change and so much going on. And I really had to prioritize what I was doing with my PhD. And this semester was the hardest class I've ever taken in my life. It's called Systems Neuroscience. And it's been such an exposure, you guys. And my final is on Thursday. And this is a great break from studying for that final. All that to say, I have much more of a grasp on my schedule after this class, and I'm really excited to bring back the podcast because I have so many amazing people who have agreed to be on it that are just ready to be interviewed, and I'm ready to interview them. So I also just need to figure out how to do it in a sustainable way and get some help with it because I cannot do it by myself. But it is coming back. It'll definitely be back this summer. I literally have 2 more days of this horrible class. And if any of my professors are listening, you know I have told you it's horrible. So thank you for asking. And I can't wait to bring it back. And my podcast, for anyone wondering, is basically talking at the intersection of lived experience and research because of everything I ranted about before. Because we need to bring that information to people with lived experience, also getting to know people who are doing research as people and representing the lived experience of people across the board and just talking about life in a very vulnerable and true way. Thank you, Grace, for your good luck. I need it. I just want to pass this class. I just want to pass this class so I can keep doing my neuroscience research and get my PhD. Um, yeah, in full transparency, we are having community conversations. So definitely to relate back to everything you guys are experiencing. I guess I've been getting a lot of feedback lately from people at various events and stuff because I speak a lot at conferences. I talk about my lived experience. I do talk a lot about research too. And I've just gotten so much feedback from people that I don't know. And I was telling Amanda this earlier. Amanda is always one of the most amazing people who makes sure that this stream works. So she's there. You just can't see her. Hi, Amanda. Everyone say hi to her. I was just telling Amanda that all this feedback I've been getting recently is that I just come off as this person who's so confident and I know what I'm talking about and I own all of my value and worth and whatever. And I mean, no, I don't. I mean, maybe I come off that way, but I think I'm very open about this, but for anyone who's new watching this and hasn't talked to me before, I'm still in recovery. I don't think I don't know what recovery like as an end goal even means. And I guess it is differently defined for everyone. But for me, I'm still in treatment. I'm in active treatment. I'm in treatment 2 to 3 times a week in ERP and for my comorbid conditions, but with my OCD specialist. I've been in treatment on and off because of sometimes losing access to a provider because of insurance and things like that since 2021. So I guess 3 years and consistently with my most recent provider since moving here since August. So it's been a long road. And I feel really called to talk about this because I think there's this impression of people, and it is valid. Like some people go into treatment and they have a very linear path to recovery and they stop scoring, they're subclinical with their OCD and maybe they relapse, but they're able to get back to that subclinical phase. And ERP is like a very structured thing for them. And that's beautiful and valid. And I love that for them. And there are people like me who treatment is both life-saving and makes a huge difference and is not linear and takes a long time. And I don't really I don't want to validate the shame I feel within myself saying that. I guess there's my OCD telling me that I am the one person doing treatment wrong. Or of course we all think, what if we don't have OCD? But the reality of it is that's just my situation. That's just my OCD and how I function. And I think both can coexist and we can still with integrity talk about hope and talk about light and talk about things getting better and also validate that OCD is hard to live with and treatment is hard. And it's okay if you're doing hard things and treatment is taking longer for you or you relapse because that's just part of life. So I just wanted to say that. If you have more questions about this, I can keep talking, but I feel inspired to keep bringing that up and being super transparent because of this feedback I keep getting from people that I just seem like I have it all together and like I don't even have anything anymore and that I'm just so bright and confident. And I mean, I think what people are really seeing in me, and maybe you can relate to this, is like I'm really passionate about what I do. I feel so grateful to have purpose and meaning in life when I didn't have for so long. I feel so excited to be able to talk to all of you. Um, but that's not necessarily confidence, I guess. Let me look through the comments. I just rambled for a long time. um, Thank you, Matt, for your love always. Seriously, you just are the kindest and right back at you. I cannot wait to present with you this summer. Oh, that's another thing. Matt and I are going to be presenting at the Orlando conference this summer. We're doing a panel on being a certified peer support specialist with Chrissy Hodges and William Cumby. So excited to do this with Matt. He is killing it. Hello, Isostasia. I hope I'm saying your name right. Please tell me if I'm not. It's so nice to see you in Mexico City. Grace's question at 7:13. Do you have any advice on how to navigate OCD during stressful situations, i.e., final exams? Hello, it's me. I have a final in 2 days. I'm in treatment, being like, how on earth do I get through this? Because it feels insurmountable. I dealt with this exact situation like during my midterm, which was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I think I wish there was an easy answer. I wish I was like, just do this thing and then it will not be stressful. And the reality is, like, that's not the case. I think for me, so much of it has been accepting that it's stressful because I think my OCD latched on to and made meaning of because I felt so activated and so stressed about these things that indeed there's something wrong with me. Because if I'm stressed, it means it's because I'm not good enough, because I'm not capable, creating all these stories and giving me library amounts of compulsions to to try to ameliorate that, which never resolves it, right? And so I think it's me just, I hate this term sometimes, but just leaning into the fact that it's stressful and it just is what it is. And behaviors to try to mitigate the stress aren't going to do anything for me specifically. All I can, and it's really hard, right? Because especially when there's stressful situations like an exam or like preparing for something that like you could do actions and like you can do actually valuable actions that help the situation, those can so easily become compulsive because compulsions are actions to ameliorate the stress, anxiety, disgust, whatever, and they can become repetitive. And the point is, or the difference is, when a compulsion is not actually helping the situation anymore, but you can convince yourself it is, right? So for me, I've just been really working on with my therapist, figuring out what is actually helpful. And there's not always a clear-cut answer, but it's also being okay with like being wrong and thinking that, this might be the right course of action. And then indeed it does become compulsive, and being okay with that and being so fluid like water and letting myself ebb and flow over time. But it's really just trying to figure out ways to do actions that let me feel like I'm going toward my values, but not secretly doing compulsions, if that makes sense. So I think it's just accepting that things are stressful and it's not my fault, or at least taking the risk, because acceptance feels like a really big word sometimes. So maybe just taking the risk that indeed it might be OCD, and just letting go of perfection, of handling it in a perfect way. There's just no way. And I always come out of these things feeling so disappointed in myself for how stressed I got and how many compulsions I did and like how much it took out for me. Like I'm just so tired after and whatever. And like me trying to do it perfectly in and of itself ends up being compulsive. So it's just like accepting it's going to suck and it's going to be hard and I will get through it. And I always come back to this concept of an upward spiral. Like I don't know if everyone can see me, but I'll try to describe it and make it with my hands. An upward spiral is exactly what it sounds like. It's the fact that you might be meeting the same situation every single time, but you're always going to be meeting it with all of the experiences underneath that you've had before. So no matter how you meet that same situation, you will always have more insight, more perspective, even if it means that you deal with the situation quote unquote poorly. And that's okay, because that's how we learn, and there's no perfect way. So my only advice for you, Grace, it's just the most long-winded, annoying advice, is just to give yourself some semblance of compassion, understand that it won't be perfect, and just accept that it will be stressful, so that you just sort of liberate yourself a little bit from it not being stressful. I hope that helps at all. Hello, Kim. I love you. Thank you for being here. Sarah asks, can you talk about the mechanics of how psychedelics help with OCD symptoms? I am a psychotherapist, science geek. So everything I'm sharing right now is speculation. We do not have actual answers. We have hypotheses. We have research takes forever. And when I say research, I mean clinical research, which takes forever, but especially mechanistic research, especially on the preclinical side. Like, we have so much to figure out. The field of psychedelics as therapeutics for psychiatric mental disorders is such in its infancy, as much as we see the hype around it right now. As someone who is a huge, I'm very hopeful about it, but we don't have any concrete evidence. So I have to add all those caveats before I get into this answer. But I can talk about what we postulate might be, how they might be beneficial to some people with OCD, but we don't have the answer. So take all of this with like 50 grains of salt, and come to the Psychedelics and OCD panel in Orlando to hear in more depth about this. But there are a few levels of inquiry regarding psychedelics and OCD. Some parts of it include the phenomenology. It includes the basically being on said substance and having an experience, and what happens to people during that experience that informs how they engage with their OCD later. So there have been many clinical reports through clinical trials that are monitored. We're not talking about anecdotes right now, although anecdotes did inform the trials to begin with. Anyway, there have been reports talking about people who do respond well, saying that they were able to engage with and understand their OCD and the psychoeducation of it all in a way that they weren't able to access so much before that. And even just being able to understand it was very liberating and motivating for them to be able to engage in treatment and trust treatment more moving forward, which is beautiful. And if that's all that it does, then that's a great tool, hopefully, in the future, as more evidence comes and as treatments are developed, to be able to encourage people with OCD who are in the depths of their suffering to be able to at least conceptualize their OCD and their relationship to it. So that's one element of many. There are also many, many biological factors that we're looking at in terms of, are psychedelics, reopening something called critical learning periods to be able to become more susceptible to treatment later on. So it's not just what they experience during the trip, it's everything after. And basically making people more malleable and plastic to treatment itself. So there's that element. There's lots of granular research being done on compounds that basically do in the brain what psychedelics do, but don't induce a trip. And we're seeing how that stacks up in general. We haven't gotten to OCD yet with this, but in general with psychiatric disorders, if people have the same outcome or if the actual trip matters. So there are so many elements to this. And I'm also looping in ketamine, not just psychedelics, because technically it is not a psychedelic, but at the dose that it's being administered, it has hallucinogenic experiences that are quite similar to those of psychedelics. So that's why we loop it in when we have these conversations. And ketamine trials are kind of the furthest along, because ketamine is already a compound that is like approved by the FDA and is used for surgery and things like that. So now it's kind of being used off label and being studied at mass in OCD, et cetera. So I hope, if nothing else, this answer told you that we don't know. We don't know. We have a lot of hope, because for people who have been non-responsive to treatment, for some people, these compounds have given them results that nothing ever has, which has convinced the most skeptical of basic scientists like me, clinicians, researchers who are the most stringent and have the highest standards for care, to study psychedelics. all different compounds in all different ways. There's also, so I'm more so going to raise questions to you than I am answers, but there's also questions of how often and for what dosage and in what setting, and how long is there symptom reduction? What does symptom reduction even mean? Those are all things that are being fleshed out um, day by day, and it's going to take forever to figure out. So we're here for the ride. I will at least have a career probably if I could get this PhD and pass this exam. So that's some of the answer. I will cut myself off now and just come to our panel to hear more, listen to my podcast to hear more. CJ Horselover 615 or 715 Eastern time asked, would you be willing to talk about your comorbid diagnoses? Sure, I would be so happy to. So where do I begin? The most important one to me in terms of how it's affected my treatment is having comorbid PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I've been diagnosed with PTSD and CPTSD, so take it however you'd like with that, some form of PTSD. So I have had PTSD in terms of my clinicians conceptualizing my life. At least since I was 8, if not earlier, and it was untreated, undiagnosed, all that fun stuff. And so for me, the reason that that specific comorbidity has really impacted my OCD is because treatment oftentimes for each condition can, if not done correctly, worsen the other condition. For me, with doing PTSD treatment with my undiagnosed and untreated OCD, I have just pathological doubt about my memory. And so it was really hard for me to do any form of processing because I would just get so, I would be doing mental compulsions basically through all of my treatment to try to figure out if it even actually happened. And I had no way of knowing. My past providers who didn't understand OCD had no way of knowing. And so I just wasn't getting better. And then in OCD treatment, as I started it, I quickly learned with my clinician, who luckily did understand PTSD, that as I was doing my exposures, I would be pushed out of my window of tolerance so quickly because I was traumatized. And so many of my themes were ingrained with my PTSD. Now, a lot of people take that and say, well, is OCD just a form of PTSD or vice versa? And no, it's not. According to the research and according to everything right now, they are discrete conditions. We have no evidence that one causes the other. We do have, evidence to a certain degree that stressful life events, not just trauma, but stressful life events can, exacerbate or cause the onset of someone who is already predisposed to having OCD, but it's, they're not the same, yet they do impact each other in terms of treatment. So I can go on a soapbox all day long about the misconceptions around trauma and PTSD and it causing OCD. If anyone wants to talk about that, I will later. But nonetheless, to say, I am now so grateful to be under the care of a clinician who understands both disorders and is able to differentiate and help me differentiate what is PTSD, what is OCD, what is both, and make sure that I can go through treatment in a way that I can actually get better, even if it means being a lot slower than other people. Hence why I said earlier that I've been in treatment for a long time and I probably will be for a long time. And that's okay. I just accept it. And my life is so much better than it was before. So I trust that it's going the way it needs to be going. And I also have, in terms of like my psychological assessment and all the diagnoses and letters I have major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. I suffered with bulimia. I mean, I guess I still suffer with bulimia, but I was in the throes of bulimia without any recovery for 10 years. Panic disorder. I mean, just give me all the letters, right? But it's important to talk about this because they all impact each other. And far more often than not, we don't just have OCD. So, and it's important to validate that treatment can look different or be more complicated, complex, or nuanced, especially when you don't have a trained clinician. But luckily, we're getting to a point in the world where we have more people that are not just trained in OCD, but things that impact OCD. So that I hope, if nothing else, you all see yourself in this. If you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I have so many things, how do I get over it? Like, you will get through it. I promise. Let's see. Matt, I love your comment at 716. Totally resonate, Uma. I've had bumps in the road and still do toward recovery and managing it. But when we still reach toward our values, when it's challenging one step at a time, that's the biggest win. Couldn't have said it better myself. That it's literally just about moving forward and continuing on and reaching toward our values, even if it means like moving our hand just an inch forward as opposed to running a mile. It's just moving forward. And for better or for worse, life will move you forward anyway. So you can just take solace in that if you feel like you're stagnant. But with every moment that you're breathing and living, you are learning more, you are experiencing more. So you will always be moving forward. So just if you're tired, because I understand the exhaustion of like feeling like you're in recovery and you're working so hard, just know that like life is moving you forward too, and life is meeting you where you're at. So thank you for saying that, Matt. Rich at 716 says, there are tons of us in the lived experience clinical community who had a nonlinear path to recovery, and there's no shame in that. Love your advocacy. Thank you so much for saying that, Rich, because I do feel alone a lot of the time. I think people oftentimes say that they want a message of hope and they want it to be this very linear, like, it sucked. Then I did treatment. I got better and you can too. And I'm living my best life. And I've just felt like an imposter being like, I am living the best life I've ever lived. And it's still really, really hard. And both things can be true. So thank you for validating that and letting me feel like I'm not alone. So that's an exposure for me. And you just made me feel so much better. Let's see. Hello, every new person who has come in. It's so nice to see you. Thank you for your comment, Grace, on the upward spiral description. I'm glad it resonated. Michael, hi. He said, hi, Uma, miss you. I miss you too. I just got to spend the weekend with Michael at an event called OCD Game Changers, which was amazing. And Michael's the best. So thank you so much for being here. And I hope all is well with you. Let's see. Isostasia asked at 728, Uma, what is the standard treatment for PTSD? Great question. So some of the most evidence-based treatments for OCD and PTSD and the first line treatments are exposure therapy, which it's really, really important to say because people hear exposure therapy, they're like, oh my gosh, that's the same thing as OCD. Exposure therapy is different than exposure with response prevention in that one has response prevention and one doesn't. And I did exposure therapy for a long time doing compulsions, especially mentally. And I did not have a clinician who was trained to understand that I was doing mental compulsions and thus there were responses. And so what people thought was me habituating and processing was actually me just doing compulsions to get away from the processing in the first place. So that's my soapbox. But exposure therapy, prolonged exposure might be the more technical term for it. There's also cognitive processing therapy. There is more emerging treatments like EMDR, eye motion desensitization and reprocessing therapy, although that is not evidence-based for OCD. So don't do it for OCD at this point. And I should say that like with the provider I have who is an OCD expert and a PTSD expert and understands the comorbidity of the two, I'm very, very lucky. I am able to incorporate elements of those treatments into my overall treatment plan as well, but from a place of being informed of OCD and being very, very careful about me lapsing into mental compulsions and seeking reassurance and all of that stuff. So that is typically how PTSD is treated as the first and second line ish treatments. Hi, Beth. It's good to see you. For anyone who's new here, please drop questions in the chat. We have been having conversations, well, really soapboxes on my end of all of the things related to survivorship, grief. I mean, we could talk about grief if you want. Neuroscience research as someone who has OCD, who studies OCD as a neuroscience trainee, psychedelic research, novel compounds, recovery, the reality of treatment right now. Just let me know any questions you have. Isotasia said at 6:30 or 7:34, glad you found the right therapist. Thank you for saying that. I am so grateful. And I think this is a good opportunity to talk about how important that is because if nothing else, other people who've experienced what I have will not feel alone. But I literally went through 18 clinicians before finding my current provider. And even before my current provider, I had 2 other OCD therapists. But before that, I saw so many therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, general providers who just literally never diagnosed me. And like I said at the beginning, I've had OCD since I was born. And looking back, it was so much more obvious than I give credit to, because I think because it took me so long to get diagnosed, OCD loves to make everything your fault, or at least my OCD does. And I just had this narrative in my head that, oh, like I just hit it really well. And it was my fault that I didn't voice my symptoms. And no, absolutely not. I was a kid that grew up in a house that in a South Asian home that had no awareness of mental illness, no awareness of anything, especially OCD. And I literally grew up thinking if I heard the term OCD that it meant like I liked cleaning too much. I was just like the people that now make me sad. Um, and in general, I had no words for mental dysfunction at all. And I was so severely suffering, but I had no idea how to put it into words. And I started seeing people after attempts on my life when I was 13, but it was never consistent. And I was always diagnosed with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, both of which I do have, but that was not the whole picture. And definitely wasn't the most major cause of my dysfunction that took so long to finally get diagnosed. And just, it's so, I think something in terms of grief and processing our experience with OCD is like realizing how long so many of us on average went without treatment, without proper treatment, and without a proper label for our hell, for lack of a better word. And I think people who go through that much misdiagnosis and mistreatment, and then when they finally get the label of OCD, and then they have to go into ERP, which at surface level, as much as it is life-saving, it's also terrifying at the beginning to have to then make the choice to trust someone new after being gaslit and mistreated for so long. Like, that's some of the bravest things that anyone can do. And I'm still working on, I guess, owning that for myself and not just feeling so much guilt and, I mean, unwarranted guilt and shame about not doing enough to get a diagnosis before. But I didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. I was the one who was sick. Like, with all the providers who saw me, like in a perfect world, they would have been able to figure that out for me. It's not for me to come and bring my own diagnosis. So, that question that you, or that comment you said, just made me really want to validate everyone else's pain and unwarranted shame they might feel by having gone so long without getting the right diagnosis, because it wasn't your fault. That's why we do what we do. That's why I'm on this live stream doing this exposure of just like talking to you and hoping you don't all hate me. Um, and being an advocate and studying this and share and spreading awareness from a place of service, because that is the only way things are going to change. I mean, this past weekend, I was at an event called OCD Game Changers. It was this incredible weekend of feeling empowered in our advocacy, sharing our story, learning how we can be more of service to the community. And then after that, right before my flight back home, I went and had lunch with my friend. And I was standing in line with my friend who was having a conversation with this family right in front of them. They were talking about their kids getting their ears pierced. And this guy said, "Oh my gosh, I'm just so OCD about about her ear piercings. Like, they have to be even." And like, I died inside. I died inside. And was so, I was also sleep deprived, so I didn't have it in me to like speak correctly in that situation. But I was just so sad that I had left a whole weekend feeling so inspired and motivated and like really empowered and hopeful about the future. And then I go to lunch, and of course, there's someone colloquially talking about OCD incorrectly. And that's just to say that that's the reality of it. I think being in the community, sometimes we find so much validation and support and understanding of OCD, and then we forget that there's like the vast majority of the world who still has no idea. And I interface with it a lot because as a researcher, I'm talking to people who usually don't know what OCD is, but most people aren't. So this is just a call to action and a reminder that if you feel shame and pain and sadness about yourself and your experience, first of all, it's not warranted to feel shame about yourself. However, take that energy and turn it into raising awareness, and however you feel is best for you. There are so many avenues to do it. Advocate however you can, because there is so much more we have to do to change things, and it will keep other people from suffering as long as we did. And for anyone who took the risk of doing ERP and trusting a therapist after being mistreated for so long, you're so brave, and I'm so proud of you. And maybe one day I'll believe that about myself too. The soapboxes, you guys. I have been buried in studying for this midterm and just like staring at graphs. So I'm just compensating for all the things I haven't gotten to say the last several days. Let's see. I love everyone's conversation in the chat and everyone supporting each other. That brings me so much joy. This is what this community is about. This is not about just me talking to you. This is about me facilitating conversation that we can all talk to each other. Matt asks at 7:34, how is your project going with OCD in the brain, Uma? This is a perfect opportunity to tell you all about OCD in the brain. So thank you, Matt. So OCD in the brain is this amazing project that was started by Dr. Tobias Hauser and his team at the University of College London. I think he's now in Germany, but at the time he was at UCL. And they, as a researcher, Tobias is incredible, and he studies OCD. He studies it in from a neuroimaging perspective, and he was just realizing that there was such a gap in communicating this information to the general public, especially because it's so hard to do OCD research on humans when there's not enough humans who like know that they have OCD to participate in the research, because we need a lot of people to have a well-powered study and well-powered studies. So because of that, he and his team embarked on starting a project to make a very easily digestible but accurate educational resource to describe what OCD is and especially how it works on a biological neuroscience level. And they did it such an incredible job in the way that they executed this project, because they realized that they couldn't do it alone and they needed to partner with all stakeholders in the community. So their research team partnered with the IOCDF, the International OCD Foundation, as well as OCD Action, which is an amazing organization in the UK, raising awareness for OCD and creating resources, and partnering with community gatekeepers, which are people with lived experience, both patients and family members, and anyone who's been affected by OCD. And we created this whole team of people that came together every 2 weeks to work on this project to make it as understandable and clear and creative and accessible as humanly possible. And it is now out in the world. It's at ocdinthebrain.com, I believe. And when you go on that website, you're able to watch this really cool animation that describes in a very accurate but simple is not the right word, a very accessible and accurate way how OCD works in the brain, at least what we know right now. Because the reality of, if you haven't gotten this from my rants on research, is that we are in the infancy of understanding anything, especially how OCD works in the brain. And so there's so much more to do. So that's a beautiful resource talking about what we do think we know and also how much we don't know and what we're working to figure out, and how people like you and I can participate in research as patients and as subjects to be able to contribute to said research and how important it is. So I highly recommend you check out that project, ocdinthebrain.com. It's available freely to everybody. And then to answer your question, Matt, it's going really, really well. So it took a year of really hard work to fully create this. I think even longer, but at least a year that I was involved. Um, and now it's out in the world. So I think the next thing we're really working on is making sure that this gets out to not just the people who know about it in the OCD community, but everybody. So we're working on ways that we can amplify this project, how we can share it with researchers so that they can also disseminate this project. Also, they can be inspired to include people with lived experience in the way they conduct research, because that's missing and so important to do. And then to just raise awareness beyond the OCD community, or at least the OCD community as it stands right now, to get to as many people as possible so people can be educated on the fact that OCD is not a joke, a quirk, an adjective. It's an actual biologically driven disorder, and they can have accurate information about it, which inherently destigmatizes OCD, because we're talking about how it's a brain disorder, not a fun thing to be so OCD, right? But it's also raising awareness for OCD and what it truly is for the countless people out there who are suffering in silence, so that they can learn that this is not something to be ashamed of. It's not something that's their fault. It's something that's going on in their brain. And most importantly, there is hope for current treatment as well as future treatment. So I had the privilege and honor of being able to amplify this project. Actually, just today, we submitted to the Society for Neuroscience to present a poster to like almost 40,000 people that go to that conference, 40,000 neuroscientists, nerds in one space, me included, to be able to raise awareness for the project and inherently raise awareness for OCD, which is super, super exciting. Hopefully there will also be a talk on it at the conference, fingers crossed, waiting on that decision, as well as so many other ways that we can uplift that. So everyone check it out. Spread this to everyone you know. It's an awesome website and help us get the word out about this amazing resource. And thanks for asking, Matt. Oh, I see everybody talking to each other. Nathan at 744 says, I want to be a lab rat for the OCD researchers. Well, you absolutely can be. Everyone can be. And dare I say, should be. Not in a way of saying it's your duty, but that's an amazing way to contribute to OCD research. And I, in general, would just advise you to Google OCD research in your area, find studies. Oftentimes they're compensated, or you're compensated for participating in it, but sometimes it depends on the funding they have. But there are likely countless opportunities for you to participate in person in research in terms of different brain scanning type modalities and being able to look at those things, as well as more psychological research. And there's just tons of opportunities. So I really, really, really encourage you to look for that. And for anyone who doesn't have access to or doesn't have readily available OCD studies around you, there are countless online surveys and online studies and virtual studies where you're doing some sort of task that are now being advertised. So please, please look out for those. Google them. They're usually available for and encouraged for anyone to participate, because typically a huge limitation of research studies is that there's a very homogeneous population. So it's usually college students because it's done on a college campus and it's easiest to incentivize college students to do so. So try to find that many college students with OCD to participate. We can't, because we don't know we have OCD, but also we need diverse populations. We need to generalize these findings to bigger populations. So we need people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, all ages to do these, to participate. So please do it. Use this as motivation to look up how you can, at the very least, just fill out a survey on Google on your phone to contribute to research. It makes a bigger difference than you think. I see a question at 746 from CJ Horselover. Is OCD neurological or psychological? What is the difference? I love this question because I get to put my neuroscientist hat on again. So the answer is, at least this is my answer, it's both. And if I had to pick one, it's neurological because our neurology drives our psychology. We're biological beings. Our brain is an organ, and our brain dictates pretty much everything about us. And then it interfaces with stimuli and then reacts to it. And so our thoughts, our actions, our feelings, they're driven by our biology. So OCD has lots of lines of evidence of having neurobiological correlates and even causes. That's not to say that our environment absolutely does impact it. And so we're really unpacking exactly how it works and what is the way that OCD ends up developing in certain people versus doesn't, the role of genes and gene expression in different parts of the brain, what triggers that gene expression, all of those things. But at the end of the day, OCD is a neurobiological disorder. And people also have the question of, is the neurobiological change, are we born with it, or is it as a result of interacting with environment that causes that neurobiological change? We don't know the answer. There are genetic studies in terms of descendants of people who generationally have OCD, and that lends itself to there being a biological component and predisposition. But at the end of the day, we're still figuring out what it is. But I think regardless of not knowing that answer, your question is really lending itself to what does neurological versus psychological even mean? And at least the way I conceptualize it is that biology is the stuff going on that's driving how we then psychologically experience and feel. And I think with mental illness, it's such a hard thing to grasp sometimes, because with things like, and I can say that I'm talking about cancer, I guess, because I'm also a cancer survivor. So it's literally both from my experience. Cancer is, there's a biological cause or biological marker, and then you're finding a biological symptom and you're solving it biologically, versus with mental illness, we're not at the point with science that we're able to biologically look at anything and decide that you have this illness. And PSA, I will say this till the day I die. Brain scans do not diagnose mental illnesses. They don't diagnose a single one. Don't go get a brain scan to try to figure out if you have a mental illness. We're not there yet. The technology is in its infancy. That's one example of the fact that at this point, we don't have a scan, we don't have a biomarker test to be able to see, do you have this disorder? Do you have this psychiatric condition? And people hear that and they think, oh, so therefore it's not biological. That is not true. That means that it is so complex that we are not able to easily test for it at this time. And the brain is the most complex organ of all. And neuroscience is truly in its infancy. Like I have many professors who don't have their PhD in neuroscience because that didn't exist when they were getting their PhD. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that we think that because we don't have a biological correlate at this point for OCD or for most psychiatric disorders, that it's not biological. And that's just simply not true. It's just that we are figuring out exactly how to identify that in a way that's reliable and conceptualize psychiatric disorders. So that's my answer. It is definitely both, and especially neurological. Reading some of the comments. Spence Roberts says at 7:51, with cognitive diffusion separating the intrusive thoughts from physical symptoms of anxiety, I've come to think of OCD as somatic delusions. The thoughts are not the most intrusive things. That is really interesting. I'm sitting with that. When you say the word delusion, it does bring to mind to me this new, or I guess more emerging line of research conceptualizing parts of OCD as like, and really honing in on the delusional aspect of it, because it's having, the fact that logic doesn't permeate the OCD brain, right? There is a version of conceptualizing when we're in the throes of our OCD and not being able to like logic our way out of it as a form of delusion. And that's really helpful in conceptualizing that because it reinforces the idea that like logic isn't going to permeate and it's about doing the way we do treatment. So that's a whole conversation for another day. And I appreciate sharing that. Oh, you guys have the kindest comments. I'm just reading through all of them. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's see. Ask me more questions in the next like 5 minutes that we have, because y'all are saying so many nice things. I'm like, I will answer things too. Do you have any questions about any of the things I ranted on? Anything about science, about my journey, about recovery, just whatever is most supportive to all of you. I see there's a conversation happening in the chat about OCPD, and that's important to talk about really quickly. There's obsessive compulsive disorder, there's obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and there is a distinct difference. Sometimes people have both and they are treated differently, but oftentimes they are treated in conjunction. So it's important to educate yourself on that, especially if you feel like you might have OCPD. Let's see. Matt at 7:53. I'm laughing because it's such a funny question. Matt asks, what came first, the chicken or the egg? The reason Matt asked that question is because that is one of the questions I ask all of my guests on my podcast to chat with Uma as we close out. And I have to say that question doesn't have any actual answer I'm looking for. I just love seeing people scratch their heads, first of all, when I'm interviewing them. But then also, I just love seeing on the spot how they answer it, and more importantly, how they got to their answer. I think that's typically, on a deeper scale, like how I love connecting with people in general. It's not so much what they say, but how they got to it. So I asked that question and I have so many different answers under the sun. And it's really funny asking a scientist that question. And my answer to that, Matt, at this point in time is I don't know. And I'm never going to figure it out. And that, for anyone in ERP right now who's in treatment, they can see that my answer is coming from leaning into uncertainty because that's the case. I don't know. I wish I knew. I have no idea how to guess. Oops. I just sneezed. Exposure. I sneeze in front of everyone on a camera. I have no idea how to answer that question. And I bet there's like a deeper answer than that, and I don't have it. So thank you for accepting my answer. Let's see. Are there any other questions I've missed? Let's see. There is a question from Beth. I hope I have the time to answer this. At 7:50, I just want to know why you aren't afraid of long COVID. How do you just go on with your life knowing it's out there and can disable you? That's a scary question. I'm glad you asked it, and I have no perfect answer for you as I've not had this entire time. I can only speak from my experience, and as someone who has struggled and does struggle with health OCD, as someone who lives with multiple disabilities, I live with cancer, I live with autoimmune diseases. I understand your pain. I understand how terrified you are, and the only answer I have is that literally anything can do that. Anything we could, and I'm not trying to put intrusive thoughts in everyone's head, but this is exposures for all of us, right? We can get in our car and we could drive and we can get hit. Or I could stay at home and I could hide from the world and a plane could fly into my home. So what am I going to do? How am I going to hide from that? Like I could get any illness under the sun. I actually can. I'm immunocompromised. I am more exposed to illnesses. And I have lived my life being homebound and afraid of everything. And I used to think that the answer was I could just get enough logic and I could not be afraid and I just needed to understand it better. And then I needed to be able to be okay with not, or just be equipped to not get it. And that's not the answer because anything is possible. And treatment is not teaching us that it's not possible. Treatment is letting us tolerate the same amount of likelihood and uncertainty as anyone. Because for me, I was so disabled by my OCD and keep being kept at home. I used to live without the lights on, without getting proper food, without being able to use the bathroom properly at my worst. And that is far scarier to me than possibly getting sick or getting sick again. I mean, I live with the sicknesses and it's such a hard thing to say because it's so valid that those illnesses are disabling and can ruin your life. And I have had my life ruined and I live with metastatic cancer and that's terrifying every single day. But not living my life because of that and letting it take the power away from me is even more scary. And I have to live with the reality that it could get worse. I could get the thing. My cancer could come back with a vengeance. It's a very real reality. It's not an OCD obsession that's not unwarranted. But the part of OCD that I think a lot of us forget is it's not necessarily the likelihood of something happening. It's how we respond to it. And the fear is valid, but keeping ourselves home and stuck and not functioning and letting the fear take over our whole life and it robbing our life, like we're guaranteeing that as opposed to risking it by living our life in a values driven way. So I wish I had a more perfect answer for you, but all I can say is please don't let that take your whole life away. And if nothing else, just hear me when I say that as someone who's lived with some of the scariest illnesses imaginable, nothing is scarier than letting them win and keep you stuck. So I'm sending you so much love. I'm sending you all so much love. And I guess that's the best way to end this because I hope you know that I am walking the walk with you. I am not on this live stream to tell you that I am better and everything's great. And here's how you get through OCD perfectly because I am right in there with you every single day. And if nothing else, I just want you to know that you're not alone. You can do it too. I'm so proud of you. And thank you for showing up for yourself and for exposing yourself to things and hearing things that might have been triggering for you and for letting yourself to live a more beautiful life, a bigger life, a fuller life, because that's all I can ask for you and myself. So sending you all so much love and closing out with the housekeeping announcements. Please stay tuned because there's a lot of fun things coming up. So Firstly, the IOCDF is a donor-sponsored nonprofit organization. Please consider making a donation at iocdf.org/donate. And we'd love to hear from you. Take our live stream survey to tell us what you'd like to see on this platform. We look forward to your feedback. The survey can be found at iocdf.org/livestream survey. Of course, my intrusive thoughts are telling me you're going to tell them that you hate me. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This live stream is one of many. You can see the entire schedule of future live streams at iocdf.org/livestreams. You could also view recordings of past live streams as well as watch our hosts answer your pre-submitted questions on IOCDF's YouTube channel. Remember to like and subscribe to get notified when live streams are scheduled, and sign up for IOCDF news and updates at iocdf.org/sign-up. And if you need resources or are looking for a therapist like I found mine, please visit iocdf.org. We also have some really exciting upcoming live streams. Wednesday on May 8th at 12 Eastern. These are all in Eastern. We have a research roundtable. Those are amazing. You should totally watch them. Kyle's awesome. Tuesday, May 14th at 7, the state of the ICDF. That is really exciting. May 15th at 12, Ask the Experts, and Thursday, May 16th at 7, Supporting Our Families. Sending you all so much love. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you next time, and have a beautiful night, you guys.